Welcome to the Northern New England Growth Meets Market Demands. I'm Rick Kaplan, the host of the New England Real Estate Journal webinars and podcast. I want to thank our sponsors for today, Northmark, U.S. Pavement Services, Inc., Margot Architects, and Inspire Technology. These are all annual sponsors. They sponsor every one of our events throughout the year. There again, I am Rick Kaplan, the host of the NEREJ and NYREJ podcast. And here is our panel for today. Our moderator is Dave.Gambaccini. He's a member of CCIM and he's with Colliers Financial Services. Sal Lupoli.
Hey.
Hey, there's Sal, he just popped in. Sal Lupoli is the CEO and president of Lupoli Companies. Tim Cummings. No, actually, we're still waiting for Tim. Tim Cummings, Economic Development for Nashua, New Hampshire. Richardson, the Boulos Co. And Daryl Luter, President of Fulcrum. And now I want to introduce our moderator for today is Dave.Gambaccini of Colliers Financial Services. It's all yours, Dave.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. As always, appreciate the opportunity. Want to welcome everybody. Thank you for giving us a little bit of time. Oh, good. We just got Tim in here as well. Want to welcome everybody to this webinar. Rick and I were talking a lot about the potential topic of this, and of course, a lot has changed really even since he introduced it. For those of you in the audience who saw it change, we were thinking something along the lines of COVID, and then it really changed, and we kind of realized that there's a lot going on that we want to address. So I've had a chance to talk to most of the panelists here today, and we're going to try to bring some content that obviously makes sense and find out how it impacts us on all levels. To step back, I am Dave.Gambaccini. I am Senior Advisor with Colliers Financial Services in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I want to give everyone a chance to actually introduce themselves a little bit and let them give a little bit of an understanding of what they're doing. I mean, I could read it, but I found in the past it's nice when these guys have a chance to kind of get speaking and let you guys hear from them. Daryl, I see you to my left on my screen. I'm going to start with you, Daryl. If you could introduce yourself, let us know what you do and who you're working with.
Great. I'm Daryl Luter. I'm the president of Fulcrum Associates. We're a commercial general contractor, construction manager based out of Amherst, New Hampshire.
Excellent. And Sal, for those of you who don't know, I'm honored to have Sal on the call, and many of us know his product, but may not know the what he does to for the communities around the area. But Sal, please introduce yourself. Let us know what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Dave. Sal Lupoli, owner, CEO of Lupoli Companies. We're a fully integrated organization that has one arm of hospitality. You might know us as Sal's Pizza. We have about 50 retail stores. About a 30-year-old organization, about 600 employees. And then we also have a commercial program where we're also in the construction business, and we own and operate about 5 million square feet. We have about 700 apartments, and we have many projects underway right now that are focused around multifamily and some commercial.
Excellent. And Richardson, if I could get you to give us a little understanding of who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, so my name is Richardson. I'm with the Boulos Company. I work as an associate here. I joined the team last summer. I previously was working in New York City in commercial real estate, property management for about 5 years. My husband and I moved back to the state of Maine, and I got connected with the Boulos Company, and it was the best decision I've made.
Excellent. And Tim Cummings with our Economic Development in Nashua.
Yes, hi Dave. Thanks for having me. Again, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development here in Nashua, New Hampshire, a municipality of just a little bit of under 100,000 in population.
Excellent. And to give folks an idea, I'm in the Manchester market. Daryl is in Amherst, New Hampshire, also kind of serving that area. Claire's in the Portland, Maine area. Sal really covers everywhere from the Greater Lawrence area, north and south, and Tim is in Nashua. So we tried to really spread this across New England as best we could to touch on a lot of areas. So getting right into it, like I said, we exactly 2 years ago, 2 years ago in a couple of days, I was on a plane. I was doing a day trip back and forth to Maryland, and it was March 12th, 2020, and it was very strange to go down to Logan, and it was strange to see a few people wearing masks, and it just felt odd. And it was a business flight. It wasn't super early. The plane was empty. I'm not kidding when I say there was 5 of us that flew from Baltimore at 8 in the morning, and it was very strange, right? It was that weird kind of pre-COVID almost. The return flight was a little more full because there was a college team on it, but it was also very weird. A few people with masks, and it was just an odd time. And on March 13th, that next day, Friday, I was eating lunch and I got an email from the school saying your kids are being sent home, but don't worry, it's only for 2 weeks. We're just going to make sure we kind of put an end to this COVID thing, and then we'll get on to life as normal. Like I said, folks, it's been basically 2 years almost to the day, and no one expected what we would see as a result of it. And as reports started coming out and people started being more optimistic of the potential end of COVID, let's say, it started feeling pretty good. And then we slid right into this Russia-Ukraine issue. So we have endured a lot, and we continue to endure a lot that's impacting all of us, right? I'm on the financial side, and we have someone from pretty much every asset of the real estate chain to make our businesses work for the folks. And let's face it, we're all members of communities. We've all put gas in our tanks, this week, and we've seen the impact. We all have home heating oil. But in general, I'm gonna shift the conversation over to Tim. I want Tim to start us off. And what I want to do, Tim, and you and I talked about this, is we've been through a lot, and a lot has changed, and a lot would impact someone like Sal to be able to get a project and go to Daryl and say, okay, give me a construction budget and help me understand how to build it. And then someone like me to say, hey, Sal, this is how you would finance it. And then to someone like Claire, who we say, Claire, can you get this leased up? We're all sort of bound, obviously, by, well, I guess a lot of things, but with you in economic development, folks come to you in cities and municipalities, or developers look to you because you guys are dealing with everything from zoning, permitting, code enforcement, policies, and that can have a great impact. Give me a snapshot. Let me set this up from, like I said, 2 years ago to today, and where you see and what are communities doing generically, and let's say Nashua, if you'd like, on how to make sure we're always moving forward for our real estate and our communities in general.
So the world changed for us dramatically 2 years ago. We were on a certain course and we had our plans in place, and we didn't really understand this pandemic and what the effects of that would be. And so what we had to learn to do in a very quick period of time, probably something the private sector is much better at, which is to innovate. So we had to figure out different process. We had to develop new systems of operations because we were in this new world order. And a lot of the government services that we provide, great example, inspections. How are we actually going to do building inspections when you can't really have people-to-people type contact? And so some of the ideas that might have been a little bit more innovative or progressive that municipalities shied away from because they weren't proven or they were a little too risky, because at the end of the day, when you're a municipality, you're the most risk adverse type of entity. We were doing things like doing inspections via iPads, and we had to learn how to adapt our services. And so what we learned was the municipalities that were more nimble and adaptive recovered quicker. And so that's something that I think now, as we are kind of in a post-pandemic phase and we're doing a lot of analysis, there's a lot of conversation happening internally about what we did right and what we can replicate moving forward and possibly keep. The one that kind of makes the newspapers is this outdoor dining sensation that people are talking about, right? And that was, prior to the pandemic, the idea of using your roadway in a different way really wouldn't take hold because the sky would fall if we lost a lane of traffic. Now you're seeing, well, you can do away with that lane of traffic. It can be used in a different way, and the sky didn't fall. So you have these types of innovations. Some of them safety related, some of them just really process operationally related. But what it's doing is forcing municipalities to be more nimble, and we need to be, because we had some big challenges going into the pandemic. The one that's in New Hampshire, it affects me in southern New Hampshire in particular, and I'm sure it's also in other parts of our region. We need more housing, and that's something that's forefront in our mind. All types of housing stock.
Sure. So in Sal, I'll come to you. I was raising private equity for some very large developments at the onset of the pandemic, and similar to what Tim said, the projects got wiped out, right? Everyone was kicked off site, and then we had to do this, staging of contractors, only a certain amount of people on a project at a time. In a similar way, Sal, can you frame for us how you saw things change, and really we'll go up to Daryl from there, because it's kind of going in succession of what we're seeing here. Sal, what have you seen over the past 2 years of where we were, where your projects were, and how you've evolved? And we'll get a little bit deeper on. We certainly understand the challenges with costs and employment and supply chain. We'll get to that, but in general, a higher view. What have you seen that change in those 2 years of where your projects were, where you were at that time, how you adapted to get through those, and how are you doing things differently now?
Well, thanks, Dave. Dave, Lupoli Companies, in owning 5 million square feet, it's not just 5 million square feet of one product. We try to balance our portfolio over the years, over 25 plus years. And the balance of the portfolio consisted of the typical portfolio: commercial, office, retail, multifamily, warehouse. So when COVID came, we very quickly, and we had 2 major projects going on in the poorest cities in the state, or north of Boston, one being Lawrence, Massachusetts, one of the most challenged communities in the state of Massachusetts. We very quickly, instantly pivoted, and we turned what was supposed to be 60 or 80,000 square feet of commercial space. We pivoted very quickly to multifamily. We had a portfolio of multifamily. All we did is eliminate some of the office, because we felt office was going to go immediately into the tank, so to speak, or really have some challenged issues. But multifamily was on the rise because of the supply in the state of Massachusetts that we have a serious problem on. So we pivoted on existing permits, went back to the lenders, not too far off from the budget that we had, realized that we had to bring a little bit more equity into it, but those deals were baked. So those numbers were already in place, the budgets were already in place, and the banks really, stood shoulder to shoulder to see the 2 major projects through. So we pivoted, one, switched from commercial to multifamily. The other thing we did is we started to take advantage of existing pieces of real estate and how can we lower our cost. Now, I will tell you, Dave, that we are a fully integrated company where we do our own construction. We have our own GCs, so we try to catch any kind of quarters that are left on the ground, so to speak. And that really helps to bring the price of our product down, so to speak. But what we did is we went after existing permits, existing locations. We went back to cities and towns and said, hey, listen, we have an opportunity to repurpose some existing real estate that had a 0 cost for that land because we already owned it. And can we repurpose that land and either build a structure or take an existing building, repurpose office into multifamily, or maybe some kind of a life science program, something that we saw that was on the incline. We had a lot of success in that, Tim. We were able to re-permit some existing land. We were able to re-permit some existing buildings and switch very, very quickly to what the hot trend in the market was. And that really lowered our exposure with the commercial office space. But with the existing commercial office space, what we did is we also pivoted and we started breaking them up into smaller spaces. We felt collectively as a team that big office space was going to take some bumps, so to speak, in the near future. So what we did is starting creating much smaller spaces. We cater to the small entrepreneur. So we started creating with our own construction company 500, 700, 1,000, 1,200 foot spaces to give you a level of comfort that there wasn't a lot of people in the office. Never forget, the small entrepreneur will always need space. He wants to, or she wants to, get out of the garage, out of the basement, and they want a presence. And when you're a small entrepreneur, a scrappy entrepreneur, you'll always need value. So by creating smaller spaces, we were able also to create value because that came with a smaller rent. Not necessarily a smaller square foot price, but a smaller overall rent. Does that make sense, Dave?
Yeah, that's great. And Tim, when, Sal mentioned something vitally important, right? They went back to communities and said, hey, we were going to go this route and we want to go this route. How do you help us with zoning? Did you see a lot of that in Nashua, and how did you guys react? Did you guys get some of those requests, and were you able to, as a municipality, were you able to pivot as quickly to meet those requests, or was it a longer process of a municipality getting to that stage?
Great question. I think municipalities, Nashua being one of them, that are comfortable with development, understood what was happening. And so we were pivoting just as quickly, trying to be just as nimble, trying to be just as proactive. If you're a municipality in that business already, you understood what was happening. On our end, we're talking to our rating agencies. I can remember back in the spring of 20, we were getting ready to go out for some bond sales, and we were talking to our rating agencies, and that was the only thing they wanted to talk about, was how our commercial corridors were doing. And we very much needed to know that we had corridors that were going to survive what was happening, because it was the reliance that we have is so vitally important. So it's all interconnected.
Great. Now, Daryl, we touched on that, and from what Sal was saying, and going over to you on the construction management side, you guys are obviously asked a lot too, and certainly, Sal, you have your teams doing this too, but Daryl, you guys are asked a lot for construction budgets, right? And you guys are trying to you're trying to bring together developers, investors, and the contractors to get these jobs done. Supply chain challenges are huge. The cost, the latent demand, physical human resources, same idea, same concept from 2 years ago to kind of where we are today. Some of those challenges and how you guys have adapted and what you're doing differently.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So, what we have right now is 2 years of historical data. So opposed to being reactive, we now have the opportunity to be proactive, which is vitally important because of the volatility in the market right now. The predictability of what's going to happen tomorrow just isn't the same as what it was a couple of years ago. So supply chain challenges have been a huge hurdle to try and overcome. Most of the causes behind those are related to manufacturing, the ability to actually produce the product, and the demand, how high of a demand some of these materials are in, and trucking, shipping, moving, handling. All of those have significant factors on cost, timing, and then again, human error. We have incorrect materials being ordered, mistakes that happen, but speculative markets drive a lot of what we're seeing in the supply chain world. The cost of oil, the cost of steel, the cost of lumber, they all correlate with each other and have a mutual effect on what it is for us to be able to do business in a timely manner. Over the years, we've looked at what's been going on. We've tried to, again, be proactive and figure how we want to counter these supply chain issues. And really for us, being construction managers, general contractors, early involvement in the process with a design team, with an owner, the earlier the better. It is a genuinely collaborative process that involves design, CM, subcontractors, vendors. We lean heavily on the independent expertise of all of these partners, and we apply that information in a collective body. So we understand trends in the vendor markets, and we want to use that information as early as we can. We want design that can be vetted during the infancy so that we can identify potential cost or design efficiencies that we can, jump on. Market trends can be applied to conceptual phases of a project to help steer it in a financially feasible direction. And then ultimately identifying what materials are available and how that's going to affect design. And what we've really done in the last, I'd say, 12 months has been focusing on procurement as one of the most significant parts of a construction project. Again, early collaboration. We develop highly in-depth procurement schedules that identify, the true influence of materials on a project and what that does to it overall. Does that mean we start the project a little bit later? Does that mean we phase the project? It really kind of helps drive the implementation of what we provide as a service as a construction manager. But then, cost is the other side of this, right? Escalation has been one of those things where over the years it's been, we've taken more of a pragmatic approach to it. It was something where you could, incorporate into a rough order of magnitude, back a napkin kind of cost based off of some historical data. And that is vitally important for, a developer or anybody with a project that is trying to kind of get a go, no go decision early on. So that's been kind of turned on end based on just the volatility that we're seeing. So we try to, again, curb that. And it's kind of a common theme, or early involvement with GC and design team and just looking at what that whole pre-construction process looks like. We function as a construction consultant. We drive the team in a direction primarily that aligns with market trends and cost. And the only time you can save money on a project is before you really put a shovel in the ground. But realistically, you can save even more money before an architect picks up a pencil. So that's been kind of our approach to curbing it. But, then there's also the reality of the relationship. We have relationships with our owners, with our vendors, where escalation is a point of contention. So contracts have been a vehicle for trying to identify how we disperse that risk across all parties. We have to understand that escalation is kind of mutually understood with all stakeholders. Lump sum development is quickly going away. There's just too much risk involved for everybody. So mutually beneficial terms, cost thresholds, we eat the first 3%, everything above that, we talk about. But accelerating procurement, pre-purchasing, you got to be willing to buy these materials, maybe pay a little extra and store them, put them somewhere where you're going to have them readily at hand so that when the schedule dictates it needs to be on site, you have it. So the long-term considerations for escalation, try to make your project repeatable. That's a good concept to put in place. Partner with your design team early and commit to completing the design. It's vitally important that the design phase is completed early on so that it is, the less changes we get during construction, the better, because that's when they're the most expensive. But all of that gets put in place with skilled labor. And that's been a huge issue over the past, 5-7 years, where we've really been pushing it hard. And there just seems to be this kind of generational disinterest or unfounded stigma that it doesn't pay well, wrecks your body. It's intellectually driven, not intellectually driven, based on uninformed and misinformation. And our concern is that the median age in the current labor market is roughly 42 years old. And that's up from 39 in the year 2000, according to the US Bureau of Labor Stats, which, project is in 2030, it's going to be 43, running out of labor. So where does it start? And I think the interest and involvement in labor starts with parents. Early involvement, teach your kids. It's okay to work in the trades. It's great to work in the trades. Promotion of vocational programs, benefits of living in the trades are great. New Hampshire runs a great program that integrates vocational studies into 7th and 8th grade students, exposing them to the benefits of working in the trades and also providing offset learning credits, which kind of allot them the financial backing in the final years of high school to pursue a career in the trades. They're great jobs, great pay. You don't have 4 years of college debt. You're not taking a break from earning. Don't let pride hold you back from pursuing a successful career in the trades. There's only one person you need to impress in your career, and that's you. So choose for yourself, not for others. But those three major trends have been the main focus for us as a CMGC over the past 2 years and how we can help.
Okay. And Daryl, you brought up a good point. In general, in commercial real estate as a whole and the trades, I think we see a very big gap in demographics, right? Aging out is a real thing. One way or another, the aging out, the leaving of the industry, and the gaps between those generations in the middle or younger generations who find this work interesting enough to continue. Claire, I want to shift over to you, and Daryl, you kind of had just touched on a little bit in a way, and I'm going to twist it a little. the labor markets, right? And where do we get these folks? And Tim mentioned it, and of course, I know, Sal, we're going to be able to get back to you on this too. Housing is a real issue, right? And I had just read something in, recently that said that New Hampshire is about 30,000 units shy of where they need to be for, I believe that's workforce housing. And of course, Portsmouth is kind of getting a furry eye on this because they have a, maybe an affluent community, and maybe that's a real challenge for them to consider workforce housing, but it happens across the state. And they're trying to find ways to meet just general housing needs. Now, I know, Claire, you had recently written your 2022 market outlook, the Boulos outlook, and you specifically talked about the economic impacts from COVID transplants. And I want to get a sense from you, and if you don't mind, I mean, you touched on it briefly, but I think in a way, and you don't have to get into it, but you were in New York until last year, and you may have been from Maine, but in some respect, you were in New York, and here you are in Maine, and part of what your article talks about are those folks and the greatest concentration of folks migrating into, let's say, New England, but as your article pointed out, Maine, were some of them from New York. Help us get into that conversation about where you see either those transplants, the impact of those transplants, and maybe some of the housing issues you're seeing from your perspective in that Portland, Maine market.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave. So Maine saw a huge number of people who relocated to the state from New York City, Massachusetts, some California, Florida, and it's been fantastic. There's a lot of benefits to that, and it's also created a lot of demand in the housing market. There is a massive housing crisis in Portland specifically, but one of the benefits of all of these people moving here is, they're working remotely, they're bringing spending power, and they're able to kind of build out on what Maine is primarily known for in Portland and move to these neighboring towns. Another note is Sal, you mentioned this catering to a smaller entrepreneur, and that's something we see a lot of in this market right now. A lot of people who are moving here to Maine, they were working from home, and now they're looking to get out into office space, either for themselves, or they are now looking to open up a new local office, which is great for the office market. And we have seen a lot of landlords kind of cater to that need. Another huge impact we're seeing that can kind of tie in with what Daryl is mentioning is we saw, and I mentioned this in the article, a massive increase in land sales. So it went up about 47% in a year. And that's throughout the state of Maine. So what we're seeing there are developers looking to bring in and cater to what we saw the most significant impact of industrial users, large industrial users looking to build in the state of Maine. So they are being challenged with having this piece of land and wanting to build large 100,000 square foot industrial buildings, but then needing the need to find somebody to fill that spec. To Daryl's point, it's so expensive. Costs of goods are rising so rapidly that the developers and tenants are faced with this battle that efficiency and timeliness are more important than ever right now when working on deals, large scale deals. The cost of goods go up weekly, if not daily. So that means money on a developer's end to build these buildings on spec, and tenants, as it may be reflected in their lease rate.
Great. Sal, I want to switch over to you because talking about housing, on the housing side, and I've looked at your portfolio. I understand what you have for properties. But I certainly want folks to hear from your side. When you're evaluating housing in the markets that you're in, how are you managing, if you are considering or managing the challenges with market rate versus workforce housing or even affordability. How do you approach that from the development side? And has it changed, let's say, because of the challenges we've had in the past 2 years?
Well, that's a great question, Dave. So let me kind of break it up into a couple of parts. First of all, Lupoli Companies are in the 3 biggest gateway cities with multifamily programs north of Boston. And the 3 most challenged communities, just by the way, as I alluded to earlier, Lowell, Lawrence, and Haverhill. But I truly believe from an entrepreneurial lens, from a small business lens, that the key to any community will be the small entrepreneur, because the small entrepreneur depends on what? Disposable income. So if you live in a gateway city, you know it's automatically economically challenged. You know that there will be a tendency to create more of an affordable or a 40B kind of a program, which is fine. Every city and community should do their fair share. However, I think from the lens of building these gateway cities, these community back to where they were once was, it has to start with the small entrepreneur. Therefore, the developers have to look at this as a journey, as a marathon. I tell my developer friends all the time, if you think you're going to go to a gateway city and take advantage and have an exit strategy of what they typically look for, the 24, 36, 48-month program, double-digit program that they would exit at, well, you're not going to find that typically in a gateway city. So how do you take advantage of that? Well, first of all, from a multi-family lens, we think we're able to sit down with the community, sit down with the planners of that community and say, listen, this is what we want to do. We want to do mostly market rate, but we also want to do a mixed-use program by bringing in retail, creating that destination, bringing people from outside the community in so they'll shop locally. Now, having said that, some of the advantages we take to get to on a mixed-use program, or let's call it a multifamily, is we'll do things a little different, Dave. Not saying what we do is the right way, but we'll do things a little differently. For example, when you squeeze a lemon, the first squeeze, you're making lemonade. The second squeeze of a lemon, sometimes people throw away. We take that second squeeze of the lemon and we put it in a container with ice and water and put it in the refrigerator, and now you have lemon water. You're getting multiple squeezes or multiple juice out of the same lemon. How do I bring that into what we're talking about? Sometimes, and what we've been doing recently is pivoting, looking at the same space, and how do we create more of a squeeze? Well, one of the things that we did, Dave, is we pivoted and we created volume. And what we did is, as opposed to just taking a space and having it on one floor, we said, what would this look like if we made it a little bit more narrow, went vertical, and created 2 floors? It did a number of things, Dave. It created the opportunity to, if you're the lowest around in price per square foot, well, I just created more square footage in that space. I got the same lemon, I went vertical, I might have spent a few more bucks, but I didn't spend a few more bucks on some of the central components, whether it's plumbing or AC or heating of that magnitude. What I did was I just created more of a squeeze in that by going vertical. That helped us create volume. We're charging price per square foot. Our price per square foot actually went down because we had a little bit more square footage, so we were able to dollar cost average it. But as the consumer looked at it, they said, you know what? Sal or the Lupoli Companies has the best price per square foot around. And as a matter of fact, I'm getting more volume, more living space with Sal. But recognizing that it might be a few bucks more. That is super important in the way we looked at the equation. We also looked at it in the multifamily market, in the market rate. If we could make top-end product in that market, for example, and I'm sure Daryl will tell you, the difference, it's like an athlete. The difference between a professional athlete, a good professional athlete, an NFL player, for example, and a great is a very small margin. That once you make it to the pros, it's a very small margin between good and great because of the arena you're in. We look at the same way as development. When you already produce a product, and if it was going to cost you, figuratively speaking, $200 a square foot to renovate or to take advantage of something, what is the difference that it costs you to do a greater project in a market rate program in a gateway city? Maybe it costs you $220, $230. Well, that means it only costs you an extra $30. Now take that extra $30 per square foot, add that to the amount of square footage you just increased. Now you're able to be a differentiator to the entire market. So right there, those two ideas that we had in a market rate program, create a quality product, squeeze that lemon a little bit more, maybe go vertical, think outside the box. But make no mistake about it, when we go to these gateway cities, we like to be the leader in speaking to the community that we want to bring disposable income in. And we're going to bring people in from outside of the community. I think people make mistakes, developers make mistakes when they go into a community and they try only to cater that community, to that community. What we do in our operation is we try to snuggle up against public transportation, TOD program, public transportation, and/or highways. Why? Because we want to cater to the highway, Dave. We don't want to cater to the city of Lawrence or the city of Haverhill or the city of Lowell. We want to cater to the highway because whoever's living north, south, east, west, those are our customers. Come take a good look at Lawrence. Come take a good look at some of these other gateway cities. There's one other thing as a developer that we were able to do in the multifamily business during this terrible past 2 years from a construction lens. We would make it our habit to call people like Tim or invite people like Tim to call us, because during this downturn that we're in, high inflation, higher interest rates, developers that have maybe started projects, maybe they're stalled a little bit, we can go in and reposition that product, number one. Also, by speaking to a town first, we can ask that town, do you have any product that we could potentially go in front of town meeting or go in front of certain boards and rezone that product? Maybe there was an abandoned or an older office product that existed that might have been in the 80s, the state-of-the-art program, but really now in 2020 is kind of passe, and that's really doesn't have appeal to people that are moving into office. Those offices are vacant on 128 and 495. We were able to take advantage of that and go and get, for example, in Littleton, Massachusetts, we were able to find 42 acres. It's known as the former IBM site, right off of 119. We went to the town, and because those towns are forward thinkers and realizing that they have product that will stay abandoned unless they think outside the box, they were able to re-permit, rezone that area for now a multifamily product on 42 acres. So it's those innovative ideas that our team have come up with. The last thing I want to leave you with, Tim, Dave, as it relates directly, and these are some of the ideas that Tim probably has seen in his great city of Nashua, but what has happened is, if we look at the multifamily product that we're building, we already talked about improving only the difference in quality, but we also decided to pivot, and in every one of the units, for very short money, Dave, we created, I guess you can call them nooks. Maybe that's where you're taking your Zoom call. Maybe that's a little bit of a private area. And we're not talking about an office, Dave. We're talking about a 4-foot by 6-foot area that's open, that has all the internet connections that you need, or all of the wiring that you need right there. Those nooks that we created, people appreciated. We also separated the amenity space. As you know, prior to 2 years ago, that amenity space would be found on one floor, whether it's the community room or the fitness center. What we did at Riverwalk Properties, and you should take a peek at that website, and it'll show you at Riverwalk Properties, what we're offering, but we put amenity space, Dave, on every single floor. It's not that old fashioned, 2,000 square foot, big room, kitchen, big TV room, but on every floor, instead of the 2,000, we gave you 600 square feet. So now, as opposed to congregating in one room, we've divided these amenity spaces into multiple levels. So you don't have to take the elevator to go down. You just walk to the end of the hallway. And you can see that clearly at Riverwalk Lofts. If you were to take a look at it, you'll see those amenity spaces on every single floor.
Excellent. Now, Sal, you
Hey, Dave.
Yeah,
can I chime in here for a second?
Yeah.
So something was mentioned by Sal that I think is really important. He mentioned the internet, and as Claire mentioned, housing becoming really important because of the relocation. And something I want to point out is we know the construction numbers are increasing. It's getting difficult, but we got an infrastructure package making its way out of DC. I think it's going to make the situation only worse because we need fiber to be catering to all the various housing communities that are going to be popping up outside of the urbanized areas. We need to have the broadband and fiber that wasn't necessarily planned on. And I think it's going to affect construction as we move forward, because I know all of us internally in city government, we're talking about how we can lay broadband and fiber to these new homes and to existing homes that may not have it, because we need it now, and it's now become such an integral part of our life, like a utility.
Right. And Tim, I was coming to you anyways. I wanted to take what Sal said and once again kind of get it from your lens. You know, Sal's been very proactive, going to communities saying, hey, what do you have for inventory? What can we revitalize? Hey, community, how would you change? How would you pivot with us? Can you give us some rezoning? Could you let us do this when it used to be this? Tim, how are you handling that? How is Nashua handling that? And let's, you know, if you have a broader lens of New Hampshire, how are you seeing those challenges where developers are coming in saying, hey, look, this is an old XYZ building and I want to do something different. I know it's not zoned for this. How can you help me? How are you guys seeing that or approaching that?
Sure, great question. So even prior to the pandemic, and even more so now, what we recognize is, and not just in my municipality, and a lot of proactive municipalities, that larger developments, those 40-ish acre type of developments, they're just so risky and they're so complicated. They truly need to be a public-private partnership. And you know, I had a developer once come to me and say, I look at it as like a 3 or 4-legged stool, and we all need to do our part. And I think that is absolutely very true. You know, the municipality needs to do their part. The developer may need to do their part. If it's a master tenant type situation, they need to do their part. And then if there's the state involvement, they need to do their part. Each party needs to do their part to put the puzzle pieces together to make a larger scale development work, to mitigate the risk as much as possible. We absolutely are doing that. I know a lot of municipalities in the region are doing that because we need the development. It's all interrelated. So we have these conversations. An exercise I'm going through right now is I'm looking at all land that we have that we've just acquired over the years, and we're going to be putting them out onto the street, and we're going to be looking to find developers that we can have a public-private partnership with, where, you know, okay, it might be a little complicated site, we need a little extra work, but, you know, we don't need to sell it for top dollar. We'll be getting the back end taxes, and we need the housing if it makes sense to be a housing play. So how do we work with what we have as our strengths with the developers and their strengths to put something together for the community for the better?
And how have you guys, regarding that specific idea, is rezoning, have you guys been able to change some zoning requirements based on someone like Sal that might come in and present something to the city or the community that hasn't yet been considered?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's you know, in a community not so much like Nashua, it's a little bit more challenging. You know, sounds like Sal was very successful out on the 495 belt, where you might have a town meeting form of government, open town meeting, even more complicated. You know, but if you're in a municipality that has a city form of government, it tends to be very proactive. And, you know, we spend a lot of time developing plans. We have a master plan, or we have a certain corridor study that we do. We do that with the hopes that a developer will come to us and say, how does this fit into your plan? And then we start that conversation.
Okay. Claire, we're obviously we're talking a lot about the development side of things, and I know, you know, you can look at Maine, like you said, and I had read too about the 47% increase in land sales in Maine in general. So obviously there's quite a bit going on. There's developments that I know are cropping up all over the place. When it comes to, and we'll get asset specific, we've seen the challenges that you know all assets have had, retail, office, multifamily. And industrial seems to have weathered this storm very strongly for many reasons, many factors, right? We've got the, you know, everyone, what's the term? The Amazon effect, and in general, industrial has been important, and more so in Maine because there's space. What information can you provide us as far as what you're seeing for these developments as it relates to the demand on the land and the industrial use or proposals for some of those developments?
So are you asking more in the sense of, you know, is the land already zoned and broken up for industrial uses, or just how?
Maybe if you're seeing a different demand, if there's a different demand for the land to be used for industrial versus other uses, maybe.
Yes, I would absolutely say that most developers or investors right now are seeking land that is industrial or, you know, a little more flexible with their zoning. There's certain referendums that were in place that have within Maine, without getting too much into local politics, that have really driven developers away from the housing market. And the cost of goods really was impacted by that. But yeah, no, I would say that investors and developers really are focusing on that industrial use to open up for these new trades that are coming in and wanting to take advantage of really opening up their production level and move their, you know, either start a second location or grow on an existing location.
And with existing, let's say in existing space for lease in Maine, regarding these conversations we're having, obviously inflation, the cost of oil, everything increasing, is that put either any urgency or demand to, let's say urgency, to your tenants who are considering a lease that may require a fit up? And either how are you either manage that on the broker side, and or are you seeing it come to you? Are people coming to you with a sense of urgency, or are you reminding these folks of, hey, this is what you should be aware of, right? Instead of a 6-month cycle to make a decision, we probably want to do this in a shorter amount of time. How is that coming to light in your market?
Absolutely, and it varies based on who's reminding who of the urgency. And it's Tim gets it, but I think that, you know, there's scenarios where we have landlords who will only entertain a certain lease term. So we're seeing lease terms really come into play here because now an improvement that may have been $20 a square foot previously is $45, $50 a square foot. And it's something the landlord can't, you know, reason with for a 3-year term. It's now being pushed. They'll only entertain maybe a 5-7 year term for a use that's looking for a fit up that's a little bit more extensive. So it really is a balancing act, and it does come down to who you're representing in the deal. If you're representing the developer, you know, and that landlord, you have to be mindful that you know, their budget's only stretched so far, and you need to make sure that it's those terms that are coming in are making sense for what they may be investing into a deal. And on the tenant side, you know, it's setting that expectation that you either need to have a significant amount of capital to you know, work and contribute to these improvements, or you need to kind of ease back on how you want the space to come together.
Sure. So almost making the tenant trying to make concessions as much as perhaps a landlord might need to.
Yeah.
Okay. Daryl, we're talking about supply chain issues. What about these escalating costs? You guys go to market, you bid a project, and Sal, you can chime in too if you'd like. You know, Sal, Daryl, you guys are bidding a project, you set it out to market, and of course there's supply chain issues and challenges along the way. With that, especially, look, what's the price today? Average price per gallon for gas is $4.30. A home heating oil is up to $5.50 a gallon, and our oil drum hit $113 this morning, went as high as $130. I think it was last week. So obviously that's got a huge impact on manufacturing and impacts the supply of everything that Daryl and Sal are trying to do. Daryl, how do you guys handle those escalations from here's where we put the budget out and a certain amount of time later that's gone up? Are you building an escalation in at the beginning, and how are you providing your budgets to the developers? Let's say someone like Sal who has to look at it and decide what to do from there.
So great question, Dave. So talking about the pre-construction process and the financial responsibility that we apply to it, as the design progresses, we carry certain contingencies, whether it's construction contingency, design contingency. Now we've incorporated an escalation contingency as well, whether it's a 3%, 5%, 7% cost based on, what we're seeing trend-wise in the market. We try to maintain some sort of level of financial contingency attached directly to escalation. With the given understanding that it just like most contingencies, if it goes unused, fantastic, you get it right back. But to make sure that we are, especially in the early stages of a project where we're trying to figure out how financially feasible the job is, to take into account escalation it's paramount. You have to do it. And if the project does not perform, it's going to be an indicator as to whether or not it's a go, no go on that. But the escalation contingency that we've carried on a project is probably the most important factor moving forward that we're going to find common in how we do everything. And again, it goes back on the relationship too. Depending on the type of construction delivery, it may be something where we don't have an opportunity to go off of that. So then it becomes a risk analysis on our end. But the recommendation for us and for any owner out there that's looking to pursue a new endeavor is to make sure that they incorporate an escalation factor of whatever they feel comfortable or whatever the project can support. It's the responsible thing to do right now. We can't just bury our head in the sand and hope it goes back to the way it was, because the way it was based on a lot of historical data, a lot of historical information that was very reliable and very accurate over a period of years. And we just can't do that anymore. We don't have that luxury. So we have to be realistic when we're talking to our customers here that they need to take this into consideration. And, even talking to Tim on certain opportunities with the city of Nashua, we have the same conversation where, we have to be real about this. We have to have that mutual understanding that this is going to impact the job in one way, shape, or form. But if we can have that open line of communication at the very beginning, it makes for a very less contentious conversation later on down the road when it's realized in the final pricing of a project.
Sure. And on my side of the world, on the financial side, I'm underwriting projects, right? We're creating performers, and we're underwriting for lending purposes. So we always build in, unknowns, escalations, and contingencies for that reason. And sometimes, consumers kind of feel a little awkward about it, but it's because of really risk and volatility, right? Risk and volatility are controlling everything we've done more so than ever. Sal, you've got your own teams. You're doing a lot of this in-house yourself, but still there's a bottom line. And when there's changes and escalations, it still impacts you. Do you just grin and bear it, or how are you doing? If your team presents you with a performer and it's going to go over budget, do you guys find ways to overcome that, or how are you guys managing the escalations on your end?
So Dave, I'm going to answer that in several parts. When you're the owner developer, and we do not develop product for an individual or an entity for them to own themselves. If Dave was to come to me and said, hey, Sal, I love the building you built in Haverhill Heights. I love Riverwalk Lofts. I love Lowell Thorndike Exchange. I want you to build that for us. And then I would say to them, who's going to own it? If he said, it's me, Sal, I would say, a lot of great guys out there. You can call Daryl at his organization. You can call Turner. You can call, Suffolk. They could build you the product. If you want me to build the product and own it, I'll sign a 15-year lease with you if it's a commercial application. Now we're talking. So let's just assume in what we do and what we like to think we do a pretty good job in, what we do is we own, manage, build, find the tenant, lease the tenant, handle the property. So we have different levels of this whole pyramid, so to speak, or this whole ladder. So it's not just for us, Dave. It's not just, okay, here's the contingency, or we're going to raise prices, or you're going to pay a sales tax on the whole program, sales tax meaning an additional expense. We don't do that. What we try to do, Dave, is we try to say, okay, at every step of this program, are there quarters to pick up on the ground? For example, we might go back to our lender and say, you know what's going on, we know what's going on. We had a 2-year interest-only program with a 5-year fixed or a 10-year fixed. Can we push that 2 years to 3 years interest only? We pick up another year before amortization starts. Can we go back to that lender, especially with, 2 years ago, interest rates were a little different than they are today, although they're on the rise again. But having said that, we've gone back during the COVID and say, hey, listen, can we make some adjustments on the interest? Can we backload some of this product? As I alluded to earlier, can we have more interest only and get away from that amortization part of it? Boom, we just picked up a quarter. What's the next quarter we pick up, Dave? We go back to the architect and say, okay, listen, I get what you drew, and let's just say now it's a commercial application. I get what you drew for this office, but how do we move things around over here? How do we create some value by maybe eliminating offices, or maybe looking at this from a different lens, or maybe having more open space so we don't have to vent AC or heat into every one of those individual offices? Number 3, we go back to the tenant and we'll say to the tenant in a very humble, respectful way, Mr. Tenant, we made a deal. We're sticking with the deal. However, you see what we see. You're probably feeling the same, kind of a pressure. Can we talk about a 5-year deal now going to a 7-year deal? Now we can push our expenses over 7 years, which in some instances might be 20 or 25% more time. We go back to that same tenant and say, how important is it for you, Dave, the tenant, to have 20 offices? I'll tell you what, Dave, let us build out 10 offices. Let us rent the cubicles for you for a time being. And in a year, we'll come back and put those other offices in. Helps lower some of the expenses for the build out. Helps maybe potentially create some value for you, Dave. The simple value that we're going to create, Dave, is we're not coming back to you, Dave, and say, listen, your TI has shrunk. You have to bring more money to the deal because we offered $20 or $40 or $50 TI. Anything over 50, you own it. Maybe this is an opportunity for you, Dave, the tenant, to put more or less into the deal by allowing us to do less of a build-up. So if you look at these components, there's not one cure-all, right? There's not one magic pill that says, okay, we're just going to slap a 10% or a 20% or a 30% because product is being raised to us. The one thing we do really different than other people is we have a long established relationship with our vendors. And a good portion of the vendors, some we can and we respect it, some we can't. The ones that we can do, we'll say this to Dave, the electrician, and I apologize for using you, Dave, as the example, but we'll go to the electrician and say, listen, we know there's not a lot of money in markup that you want to make off of us. You want to be a long-standing vendor with us. Allow us to buy the product direct. Allow us to store the product. Allow us to control that inventory. Allow us to control that cash flow. And by doing that, there are some vendors that say, hey, listen, I love the fact that I don't have to carry that cash flow or those numbers on my balance sheet as far as an inventory over there and waiting to get paid 30, 60, 90 days, depending on what the deal is. So what we'll do is we'll pick up another quarter, and we call our business, our development team, our whole strategy at Lupoli Companies, everything we do, including the hospitality, because we sell, and this sounds, a little brash right now, but we sell a really large 19-inch pizza for an economical price because we pick up quarters. So I just gave you 5, 6 examples of how we pick up a quarter. And Dave, the last time I looked, 4 quarters equal $1. So as opposed to somebody just trying to pick up that buck by slapping you with a 10% increase or a 20% increase, we try to stretch that out, and we let some of the other people that are benefiting from this whole program, we let them help absorb, not to be penalized. Super critical. We love our vendors. We take care of them. We use the same ones all the time. We have vendors that have been on our projects now going on 20 years. They go from one project to another. So even they look at it and say, okay, how do we help Sal and the Lupoli Companies, because if we're helping that organization, that means that organization will continue to build. Once it stops, we stop. And instead of us having 20 people on the payroll, now I might have to cut it down to 15. So yes, Sal, you buy the product and realize that savings, or not being able to mark it up. I blame no vendor for marking up a product 10 or 15 or 20%. They got to carry it, they got to inventory it, they got to buy it up front. But if you let me do that, there's a quarter, there's a quarter, there's a quarter. By doing that, Dave, I think we're able to support the ultimate goal, which is that customer or the end product, by keeping our product as low as we can. I'm not saying we always succeed in it, but those are 5 or 6 clear examples that you can find quarters on the ground and pick them up.
Excellent. Sal, thank you very much. I know Rick's starting to sweat because it's 11 o'clock. So I just want to make sure to try to wrap it and let Rick chime in here and see what's next. But listen, you've all given some great perspective on this. I'd like to believe we brought some engaging conversation to our audience and those who joined us, and we thank you again. Key takeaways: pick up quarters, and don't forget to make lemon water after you've made lemonade. With that, I thank you all. If we can continue, I will. But Rick, I'll let you chime in. And
well, I want to thank everyone. Great conversation today. And I want to remind everyone this is being recorded, and it will play on our YouTube channel as well as the NEREJ and NYREJ websites, as well as on our podcast, which is Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Prime. And that will probably be up on Monday. Before we go to we're going to have a short little networking. So I'm going to do a PowerPoint, and then we'll go. Anyone that wants to stay on with us, they are welcome to, and they can turn their audio and video on, and we can bring them into the conversation. But before we go, we have a question, and this is from Christopher Stevenson from Boulos Company. From a brokerage perspective, how are the increases in construction costs impacting tenants? Has it impacted lease negotiations? And that question is for everyone.
I vote either Claire or Sal take that one.
Ladies before gentlemen.
Yeah, I think I had touched on it earlier. The biggest impact it's having is, it's efficiency and timeliness in the negotiation process is more important than ever. And it's also really, pressing our tenants to consider longer terms than they usually would, and or just contributing more to the costs and potentially building that into a lease rate. So it's coming out in a lot of different forms. And to Sal's latest point, creativity is kind of is what we really need to be focusing on right now from a brokerage perspective, and helping our tenants navigate this rise in construction costs.
Sal, what about your perspective on that?
So what's super important is, let's say I was to make a deal with Dave, the tenant. Once again, you're on the spotlight, Dave.
Love it.
And I was to make a deal with you, and we made a deal, and just take a round number. You're going to give us $3,000 a month, and you're going to give it, $3,000 a month is $36,000 a year. I would come back to Dave and say, Dave, listen, you see what's happening with the rising expenses. I can't touch the $36,000, Dave. So I don't want to charge you more for that 3,000 square feet at $12 a square foot. But what I'd like to do, Dave, is let's leave that 36. I'm going to give you the same quality build out, but how do we get that 3,000 square feet into 2,700? Got to leave that 36,000 alone, Dave. Don't look at the price per square foot. Look at it exactly what it's going to cost you on your income statement, therefore on your balance sheet. It's going to cost you $36,000 a year. I'm going to give you the same quality product, but I got to squeeze you a little bit into 2,700 square feet. Why are you doing that, Sal? I really need that. I'll tell you what, instead of having that IT closet inside your space, let's put it outside the space in some other area that I don't want to call it common, but might be a little cheaper to put together than inside your space. Let me squeeze you, but Dave, I'm going to give you the same quality. I just can't give it to you in 3,000. Work with me, Dave, put it in 2,700. And therefore it's a win-win. It's a win-win for us because as we go to our lenders are looking at the cash flow and they're looking at the debt ratio and they're saying, okay, you're getting that same 36,000. We're good with it. Very rarely will a bank say, hey, listen, you might be getting that same 36, but now, you've just decreased the amount of square footage. The truth of the fact is you've increased the price per square foot. Once again, it's a win-win. And I think when you build the relationship with the tenant, and that's what separates, our organization, and we say it humbly, it comes down to this. This is for all the entrepreneurs that are in development, in leasing, in building, in banking, finance. It's about that relationship, because if I can get Dave to understand my problems and I listen to Dave's problems and he sees that there's a common thread, then the tenant and the landlord will work together. What's the worst thing that can happen, Dave, is when a landlord says to a tenant or a broker says to a tenant, hey, listen, it is what it is, take it or leave it. Now, all of a sudden, Dave, if I'm a tenant, you forgot my feelings. Hey, listen, I'm a big part of this equation. Communicate, talk, inundate them with communication, inundate them with information. And then all of a sudden that tenant will feel part of your success. Once they feel part of your success and he feels that you're part of his success or her success, then they'll be more apt to be a little malleable. And sometimes that malleable can come in a couple of 100 square feet.
Excellent. Any other questions, Rick?
Well, thank you, Dave. Great job moderating. I want to thank everyone on the panel. Daryl, nice to meet you. First time I've ever met you. Sal, always great to see you. Hopefully in person soon.
Rick, I hope so.
And Claire, nice to meet you. Thank you for doing this. And Tim, it's been such a long time. We haven't seen you in a long time either, so it's good to see you. I am going to put up a PowerPoint, and we'll switch it over to our network. Anyone that does want to turn on their audio and video, they're welcome to keep on the screen with us and join discussions. So be patient with me for just 2 seconds. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Northern New England growth meets market demands. Let's go to, I want to thank our sponsors. This is our our annual sponsors, Northmark, U.S. Pavement Services, Mogul Architects, and Inspired Technology. That's me, and this is, I'm the host of the podcast, and you'll see it, it's on Apple Podcast, Amazon Prime, Spotify. You can also view it on our website, NEREJ.com or NYREJ.com, and also on our YouTube channel. Again, let me thank our speakers. Our moderator was Dave.Gambaccini, a CCIM member, and he's with Colliers Financial Services. Sal Lupoli, CEO and President of Lupoli Companies. Tim Cummings, Economic Development at Nashua, New Hampshire. Claire Richardson, the Boulos Company, and Daryl Luter, President of Fulcrum.